Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today, and I want to thank my good friend Henry Cuellar, who represents the Laredo area in Texas in the United States Congress, and who's been a regular partner with me on trade issues and border issues. We obviously come from Texas, a border state. These issues, this humanitarian crisis at the border is personal for us and the people we represent. Of course, it was President Obama who first in 2014 called it a humanitarian and security crisis then, and the numbers have done nothing but get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we agreed with him then, and we still agree with President Obama's characterization. But it has now gone from a humanitarian and security crisis to a full-blown system failure. We really are on the brink of collapse at the border. In February and March of this year, a 2-month period, more than 180,000 people were apprehended at the border. 180,000 people, a more than 33% increase from the worst months of 2014 when President Obama made his comments. Detention beds are at overcapacity. The already understaffed Border Patrol is struggling to meet the needs of the people they come in contact with. We know that many officers and agents are pulling double duty as law enforcement officers have to become caregivers for children. Customs agents are being pulled off of their duty to process migrants. The non-governmental organizations and community organizations in the communities are unable to keep pace with the volume of people coming through their communities. And cities and counties along the border are bearing the brunt of this influx of humanity. And it shows no signs of abating or lessening. My prediction is the numbers will continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. In March alone, it was 103,000 individuals. In February, it was 76,000, so you can see the trend line. Just recently, we heard from the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce in my hometown of San Antonio that the wait times at the border are costing businesses huge sums of money. And just so people can understand, the ports of entry like Laredo have as many as 14,000 trucks go back and forth each day. And of course, the business connections between northern Mexico and Texas and the passage across the ports of entry are an important part of their business model. And so when you have an inventory based on a just-in-time delivery of parts, for example, car parts or medical devices, obviously delays along the border are extraordinarily costly, and the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce puts that figure at $800 million a day. We share their concerns, and Henry and I heard that when I was in Laredo just last week from our constituents there, and it has a dramatic impact not only on states like Texas, but I would argue for the entire country, because a lot of these manufactured goods that start along the border region are actually put together finally in places like Michigan and elsewhere in the heartland of the countries. So it's pretty clear to anybody who's paying attention that we have a problem and we need to solve the problem. And that's what Congressman Cuellar and I are offering to do today in a bicameral, bipartisan sort of way. We've been told by everybody who's paid attention to the problem, from Jay Johnson, President Obama's Secretary of Homeland Security, to the former and current Border Patrol and DHS leadership, that they can't solve this problem on their own. They need Congress to pass legislation to update the laws and allow better processing of individuals seeking to come here, including more staffing and infrastructure. That's why we're introducing the HUMANE Act, which will make the necessary reforms, and it includes provisions both from Republicans and Democrats. This is bipartisan and bicameral, as I said. The HUMANE Act would allow family units to stay together. The concern about separation of families, we share those concerns, and the HUMANE Act would enable those families to stay together. But it would also streamline the process of those waiting to have their claims resolved. Many of these people showing up at the border are seeking asylum in the United States, and we know that there's about an 800,000 case backlog in the immigration courts. And so the chances of them ever having a chance appearing in front of an immigration judge to assert their asylum claim, some of which are going to be meritorious. Many of them will never have that opportunity. Second, this will provide additional safeguards, and this is something I know that was particularly important to Congressman Cuellar, to prevent children from being placed in custody of dangerous individuals. We know that there are instances of children being essentially rented out because they know that the smugglers, the coyotes, know that people will be treated differently if they come in with a child, but there's no way of determining in many instances whether that is actually the biological child of the adult with them. Importantly, we also mandate the hiring of 600 new CBP, Customs and Border Protection personnel, and require the Department of Homeland Security to establish regional processing centers in high traffic areas, places like El Paso and Laredo. And it will improve the processing of humanitarian relief claims by those being processed at the ports of entry. In other words, it's dangerous for everybody involved to have people coming between the ports of entry in the wild, wild west of that represents. And it's much safer and I think more orderly and more compassionate to direct those individuals to make their claims at the ports of entry. Now, we know this will not solve every problem, but it will have a huge impact. First of all, I think it will send a message that there's not free passage into the United States as long as you show up at the border, because you've simply overwhelmed our capacity to deal with the numbers involved in any sort of orderly or organized way. But it will also allow the legitimate trade and commerce that is so much the lifeblood, not only of the border region and Texas, but to the country, to continue to flow, and bringing some order and out of the chaos, and hopefully avoiding some of the abuses that we know now occur routinely when it comes to moving migrants from Central America up through Mexico into the United States. So I'm grateful to Congressman Cuellar for working with me and his continued commitment, not only to his district and to the state, but to the country. He's been an ally, as I said, on bringing a number of common sense reforms from Texas to the federal level. And so it's my hope that we will have an opportunity in the not too distant future to take this legislation up before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we can reach out to allies in the House and the Senate to try to build support for this, and that we will actually get it to the President's desk so we can provide some relief for those struggling to manage this overwhelming crisis. And now I'd like to turn the podium over to Congressman Cuellar.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. And again, I do want to thank the Senator. He and I, for many years from Texas, we've been working in a very bipartisan way. You know, a lot of people talk about being bipartisan. They'll say that, but they don't roll up their sleeves and actually get the work done. And I have to say the Senator has done that. And he and I on trade issues and other issues, we've been working together on issues for many years. The Senator did a good job in painting what the legislation does. Let me give you a little bit of context to why this legislation is important. If you look at some of the official numbers, if you look at who was coming in the southern border in 2006, over 90% of the people coming in were people from Mexico in 2006. And now you have 73% of the people coming in through the southern borders are immigrants from the Northern Triangle. Notice how that changed from 2006, 90% were Mexicanos, now 73% of them from those three particular countries. In 2006, family units and unaccompanied kids were 10% of the people coming into the United States. Now, over 61% of the people coming in are family units and or unaccompanied kids. In 2006, 95% of the people that came in were returned within hours. Again, because 90% were Mexicanos, so therefore you just make arrangements, work with the Mexican government, and then put them across. Now, over 97% of the people come in, these are 2017 numbers, over 97% of the people stay in the U.S. And that's because of the system that we have. The the system that we have, the immigration system, as to when somebody comes in through ports of entries or somebody comes to the port, goes through a very complicated process. And there's a lot of efficiencies there. And this is one of the things that the senator and I are doing. So I asked my staff, I said, hey guys, can you break down, break it down step by step? When somebody comes in, what does it look like? What does the flow chart look like? This is what we're talking about. It's a very, and I think we can share this information with y'all. We'll be happy to share this with you, and you will see that there are so many steps. And within the steps that we're looking at, there's a lot of efficiencies, and this is what the senator and I are trying to address. Do we have a humanitarian crisis? In my opinion, just like I said in 2014, yes, we do. We have a lot of people coming in, and in large numbers. In fact, just a couple of days, what was it, about 400 people in the apostle sector said, here we are, come in. And this is why I think a wall doesn't work, because they'll come to the riverbank and say, here I am, and they'll ask for their asylum and their credible fear. So you have people coming in because they figured out that all you have to do is get to the U.S. border and just ask for asylum or credible fear. Now, how is that affecting also our neighbor to the south, Mexico? Last week I was in Mexico City on a delegation. We were talking there about the Labor Reform Act that I think I talked to some of y'all a few minutes ago. It's important for Mexico to pass its Labor Reform Act so we can then look at have Congress move forward on this. But when I was there, I sat down with Tunatayo Guillen, and as you know, he is the head of the Mexican Migrant Institute. They deal with migrants. And while we were sitting there, he got a phone call, and you could see there was something going on. Well, I think some of y'all saw, there was about, 1,300 people that escaped from a center. Well, he had just gotten a call that 1,300 or so of the people that they were holding, processing, had just broken out. And mainly they were Cubans. Now, the Cubans are coming in, as an example, not coming in because of the wet foot, dry foot. As you know, that got changed a couple of years ago. But they're now saying the same thing. Just come to the U.S., ask for asylum, ask for credible fear, and it's going to be years before they get to it. Because as you know, right now our immigration courts are about 860,000 cases behind, and I think almost every week we'll add another 10,000. To it because of the large numbers of people coming in. The immigration cases are behind. So as I was talking to the Mexican officials and to the Chief of Staff, Alfonso Romo, also the Chief of Staff for the President, of the folks, Mexico, what I was trying to relate to them, I said, listen, it's not only a U.S. problem, but if you look at the people at your border, they're not only from Central America, but they are from, name the country, China, India, Pakistan, Cuba, Vietnam, name the country they're coming in. So, what I was telling them, hey, you got to deal now with travel documents and how to fly them back and all that. And what I was trying to tell them, at least my perspective, was you got to understand this is a different type of situation. It's not only mainly Central Americans, but they're coming in. And Mexico, I mean, they're not going to be seen as doing the dirty work for the United States, but Mexico's trying to do their own. In fact, they said that their goal is to try to hold and return 800 people a day. 800 people a day, that's their goal. In March, they stopped and returned 13,000 individuals. If they go with this goal, they'll be doing roughly 24,000 a month. And if they keep that up for a year, do the math, you're talking about 300,000 people that would have been coming over to the United States. So we got to work with our friends to the south. We cannot play a defense on the 1 yard line, which is called the U.S.-Mexico border, work with our friends over there, making sure that we don't cut the aid, but increase the aid to Central America. As you know, we started that $750 million a year. And it got reduced to 529 million. There was $800 million have been appropriated that's been on the pipeline for a while. The 500 that we added last year, that's about $1.3 billion that's waiting to help work with those countries. But we do want those countries to do a little better in trying to keep the folks from coming over here. Work on security, work on other programs so they don't. We just can't give them money and the folks are still coming over here. So there is language that we're looking at to address that issue. So I paint this situation because in 2004, if you remember, Senator, we tried to do something on it, but unfortunately, as you know, anytime you use the word immigration here in the Congress, it's hard to get things done. If we would have done something in 2014, maybe the numbers would have been smaller now. Maybe we would have gotten rid of some of the loopholes that we have. Maybe it would have been different. Bottom line is, I live on the border. I always get a kick out of my colleagues or even administration officials say, I was down at the border for a couple hours and I learned this. Well, I live there. I drink the water, I breathe the air, so I'm there. I talk to Border Patrol, CBP, and every time I'm back there. And one of the things we're seeing is that this, and I'll conclude with this because the senator was right about this point, the immigration issue that we have at the border, and now we hear that. I was talking to Betty Flores, remember the former mayor of Laredo. She texted me. I'm at an awards program here at one of the high schools in Laredo. People are asking, what's Congress doing about this immigration issue? People are coming in, something has to be done. So in an area like Laredo, and Laredo's 96% Hispanic, the most Hispanic city percentage-wise according to the U.S. Census, people are saying, what is Congress doing? And this is why we're here. But this immigration issue has now become a trade issue. A trade issue because of the processing center that we have in McAllen, and you get all these family units. Now CBP officers, which I disagree, but they moved them over to basically do care and custody. What does that mean? Changing diapers, making sandwiches, taking people to the hospitals, and those are things that those trained officials that do cargo inspections. Laredo does 14 to 16,000 trailers a day. We got more trains than any other place in trucks. We got more buses than any other place in the country. We're number one in buses. We're number one in trains. We're number one in trucks. They're number one inland ports, second only to LA. So when you take those officers from the men and women in blue to go do custody and care at a Border Patrol station, then you're slowing down the trade. Hours and hours, and I'll be happy to share videos from drones, from other viewpoints as to how that has affected the slowdown. And we've been working, the senator and I have been working on trying to get those CBP officers. They took 545 CBP officers. And therefore, if you take those officers from the southwest border to go do custody and care at a Border Patrol, remember, these are customs, then you know what happens if you take 545. That affects the trade. So this immigration issue has now become a trade issue. And this is why the senator and I are looking at this issue and see what we come up. Senator, I always joke around because we sat down and looked at, let's make this change. It was something we came together. If somebody has a better idea, we've always said that, give it to us. And if there's a critic out there, then tell us what's better, because we haven't done anything. We've seen what's happening in Mexico, in the southern border in Chiapas with Guatemala. We're seeing what's happening at the border. We have to do something together, and this is why the senator and I are here. So I'll take all the easy questions. The senator will take all the hard questions.
Well, stand right here. We'll both take them together. Yes, sir.
Senator, have you spoken to Senator Graham or Leader McConnell about this bill and maybe getting it through judiciary to the floor? And Congressman, have you spoken to Speaker Pelosi or anyone else in Democratic leadership about how this might fare in the House?
I've been talking to, of course, Chairman Johnson of the Homeland Security Committee, who's working on this issue as well. Wrote an outstanding piece in the Wall Street Journal describing the problem. He understands it very well. There's a number of my colleagues and I are working on it. I did also mention to Leader McConnell that we were working on a proposed solution yesterday, and he welcomes it. I couldn't agree more with Henry that, mainly what we hear are crickets. We don't hear too many other solutions, so that's what prompted us to try to come together in a bicameral, bipartisan way and offer what we think will actually work. It doesn't change any asylum laws. It just makes sure that people who have valid claims get those claims heard promptly. And it also sends a message of deterrence. So if you are thinking about spending $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to a human smuggler to make your way from Central America to the United States, and if you need to know that that money is not going to be well spent because you won't be able to stay here unless you do meet the legal requirements of an asylum claim. So that deterrence message is important too.
Yeah, and again, we did tell the Speaker's office about this work that we're doing. We intend to sit down with folks. And again, we'll be happy to see if we can get something done. Because again, we tried in 2014, and here we are with a bigger problem than we had in 2014. Larger numbers are coming in. So we certainly want to make sure that we try to get something done on it. Especially, we're protecting due process. If you look at the legislation, there are folks that go from open borders, and this is certainly not open borders. You're talking about people doing very extreme border security. I think what the senator and I try to come up with something that we hope is somewhere in the middle that's practical to try to get the work done. Due process is protected. People can ask for asylum. The only thing is we want their day in court faster. And we certainly, one of the things that we want to see more judges at the border, because in my opinion, the Obama administration, the Trump administration are doing this backwards. What they do right now, and we've been pushing for judges, immigration judges, I think the last 4 years in appropriations, we put new monies for judges. And as we put the new judges, what happens to those judges? We've been asking for the border. What they do, Obama, Trump administration, both of them, they said, okay, the people are released, they're sent to the bus stations, they take their buses, they go anywhere in the US, and then they end up in different parts of the United States. When they get there, then they'll say, most of the people are here in this particular city or cities, and therefore let's put the judges where those cities are, Chicago, New York, Miami, whatever, backwards. I think we need to have the judges at the border so you can give the court their hearing there. Now, this conference committee that we did on February, it was interesting. I had 100 judges. It got reduced to 50 team judges, immigration judges. 2 days afterwards, there was a memo that got sent off. We're freezing any hiring of immigration judges because we don't have any money. I mean, you're like, we just gave you enough money to hire 50 immigration judges. They said it's the interpreter cause. I don't know how that would slow down the hiring of 50 judges, especially where 2 days before we had, the president had signed the paperwork. So again, we got to hire more judges. We got to change the ports of entry where asylum cases are coming in, because you have to go to those ports of entry. Ports of entries are set up to handle trade and tourism. Now there's a third dimension called immigration. So if somebody's coming in and asking for asylum, there's no place to put them. They're putting them in offices. For example, the last port I was in the valley was Hidalgo, and they have people, literally people in offices that the offices were used. So we have to also make some changes to our ports of entry so they can handle the third component, which is immigration.
Just a quick follow-up. You said that the law doesn't change, the bill doesn't change asylum laws.
Right.
Is there nothing in the bill about the credible fear threshold and changing that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Tom?
When you guys introduced this legislation, or the same title legislation in 2014, there was criticism from both the right and the left, with the right saying...
That's to be expected.
Well, what have you done in the intervening years to perhaps allay those concerns on both sides?
Well, I think you're right that there are a lot of critics out there. There are going to be people that say that I didn't go far enough and Henry went too far.
Too far.
And but the only way you get things done here in Congress is on a bipartisan, bicameral way, and we have come together on something we agree on will be a big step in the right direction toward a solution to the crisis that exists on the border. Are there going to be critics? Sure, there are going to be critics. Frankly, I think Henry understands this problem better than anybody because he lives in Laredo, Texas on the border. I'd like to think I understand it because I've listened a lot to my constituents about what the solutions are. I think there is a growing sense of unease. Even Henry and I have had conversations about his conversations with his colleagues that, you know, the status quo is not sustainable. This is getting worse every day. And so I think that is what has changed, Tom. There's a growing sense of urgency because of the numbers are just skyrocketing.
But has anything actually in the legislation changed that would perhaps address those concerns?
The legislation, I think, has improved. We've also included a number of recommendations.
From the Bipartisan Homeland Security Advisory Council, so we added there. And we added a lot of language for protecting of the children.
Right.
So we added that. But, you know, one of the key provisions that we are asking to change, just like we did in 2014, and now, is, as you know, when folks come in from contiguous countries, Mexico and Canada, they can be returned voluntarily working with the officials. So that means any other country besides Canada and Mexico are pretty much, if you bring a child, you can come in, and I gave you the numbers, 97% of the people now stay, where in the 2006, 95% would be returned pretty quickly, and that's because of that particular change. That particular change, I know there were some people on the left that had a problem, but if I would ask you to just look this up, Obama was in favor, Clinton was in favor, and we also had some House leaders, Democratic leaders, that were in favor. And then they changed their minds. The only one that did not change their mind was Secretary Johnson. He was the only one that said, hey, this is the right thing to do, because there are protections. I mean, that's the only thing is voluntary return, but everything else, asylum, everything else, is, you know, should be protected. Their due process is protected. Their day in court. In fact, we want to move the immigration day a lot faster. And, you know, let the immigration judge decide. If he or she says they stay, bienvenidos, or whatever the language might be, because now it's not only Spanish. But if he or she says you got to return, then they got to return.
I would just point out that the fact we weren't successful in 2014 doesn't mean we should give up. My experience here in Congress is sometimes you have to work on things for years before it finally penetrates through and you can get something done. Yes, sir.
Yesterday, the administration sent up a request, $4.5 billion for the border as supplemental. Do you think that this bill or parts of it could get wrapped into dealing with that?
Well, I'm going to defer to Henry because he's an appropriator, but I would say this is something that needs to be done on its own and done quickly. One of the problems we've had with immigration legislation generally is it becomes a Christmas tree, and then it becomes so burdened with so many different moving parts that nothing ever happens. And so let's get this done, get it behind us, and then keep working on the other issues. I do think that maybe if we can just, for once, find a bipartisan, bicameral solution to a crisis like this, maybe that would provide a little more self-confidence in Congress and demonstration of good faith that we can then build on to do other things we know we need to do in our immigration system. Yes, sir.
Sí, cómo no.
Habló sobre las ineficiencias del sistema. ¿Cómo esta legislación acabaría con esas ineficiencias?
Sí, bueno, primero, como dije ahorita, si miramos el sistema de inmigración, y lo voy a dar copias, I'll give you copies if y'all want copies. This is a pretty good flow chart that shows you what people have to go on it. Lo que vemos es esto, es que si una persona quiere ir a frente de un juez, se tarda años. Y lo que queremos hacer, parte de esto es ocupar más jueces de inmigración, tener la audiencia lo más pronto posible. A veces el 85 de 90% se van a rechazar. Y si son 10 o 15%, bienvenido a esas personas. Esa es una de las cosas que queremos hacer. También cómo manejamos los casos que vienen a los puentes. Ahorita los puentes nomás pueden manejar comercio, turismo, pero no pueden manejar emigración. Y eso es algo muy importante porque si van a los puertos ahorita, tienen a las personas que están pidiendo esta ayuda que están en oficinas, duermen en las oficinas, y eso es no la manera de tratar a esas personas. Para mí, si yo ponía los jueces de migración ahí en los puertos de entradas para tener una audiencia y una parte donde pueden estar, porque no pueden estar por días en una oficina. I mean, es algo, deben de ver lo que está pasando y por eso queremos ver si hay otra manera de tratar a esas personas, y unas personas se van a regresar y unas personas no se van a regresar. Como digo, México también está haciendo su parte y eso es algo importante. Quieren ahorita regresar 600, 800 personas al día, que es un número grande. El mes pasado, 13,000 casos. Y si lo hacen a 800 personas al día, estamos hablando de 24,000 personas que van a parar y regresar. Y si hacen eso en un año, estamos hablando de un número grande de personas que van a venir o van a tratar de entrar a los Estados Unidos.
We have time maybe for one more question, and then our staff will be available to answer any other questions or provide follow-up. Yes, ma'am.
Senator and Congressman, the urgency, the speeding up of the process, the percentage of rejections, their numbers and ideas, they're very close in spirit to the memorandum that President Trump put out, his administration. Do you find any other common ground and any possibility of actually negotiating with the president and trying to come together, not just in Congress, but with the administration?
Well, I know the president and the acting secretary have said, and it's true, that the only people who can solve this problem are Congress. And of course, that would require the president's signature on any legislation that we pass. We've tried everything else, and now we're left with Congress stepping up and doing our duty. So I do think there's certainly common ground here. We would obviously have to negotiate, like Henry and I did, on the wording of the legislation, and that would go through the Judiciary Committee and, of course, working with the administration to try to come up with a consensus product. But I think we understand, everybody pretty much understands what the problem is and understands that this is going to get worse and worse and worse until we act, both in terms of processing justified claims of asylum, rejecting those that are not well taken, and also sending a message to the criminal organizations that are continuing to get rich, charging thousands of dollars per person to ship people from Central America up through Mexico and the United States. And to Henry's point, we can get you a list, I think, of all the different countries of people hail from who are detained along the border. It will surprise you because I think the number is well over 100 different countries. Yeah. Because people know if you can make it to Central America and you can pay your money, you can make it into the United States using this broken process. So thank you all very much for being here.
Senator, with regard to the asylum, the president said yesterday in a memo to Mazzolini that he wants a fee for asylum seekers to pay a fee when they come. Is that one of the legislation? Is that part that you all would agree to?
Our bill does not include any fees. It basically takes existing law and the existing system and makes sure that people get due process and get expedited consideration of their claims. And that's what our bill does. So what the president is suggesting is something separate from what we are proposing here.
Would it have your support if that's what he's pushing for?
If we are successful in getting this bill passed, I think this will go a long way to address the problems that the president and everybody recognizes we're having at the border. I understand in the absence of legislation, the administration is trying to figure something that will have an impact. But the truth is this legislation will have a far greater impact than anything that's been proposed by the administration. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.